Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this evening, Learn from the Experts, Paying for Your Accessory Dwelling Unit in the Current Economy. It is so wonderful to see folks streaming into the webinar. And as we get started, I want to just share a little bit of Zoom logistics. We're actually not going to be doing a poll this evening. We have 1 hour to get you lots of helpful information about paying for your ADU in the current economy. So we're just going to focus on some brief presentations and audience Q&A. So you can start entering questions in the audience Q&A chat that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be answering those questions both in writing and verbally this evening. So quick introductions. My name is Renee Champ. I'm the director of the nonprofit Napa Sonoma ADU Center. And I am also thrilled to introduce my colleague, Scott Johnson. He is the founder of Pocket Housing LLC, and he serves as the ADU expert here at the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. And in a moment, once I give a brief introductory presentation, I'm going to be handing off and introducing you to our finance experts joining us this evening and making another couple rounds of introductions over the course of the evening as well. So without further ado, a little bit about our nonprofit, the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. We serve homeowners based across all of the 14 cities and 2 counties here in the Napa Sonoma region. We are a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County, as well as some of our local jurisdictions. And again, we are here to serve as a neutral third-party resource for you. We're not industry professionals that you hire for your project, and we're not local government. We partner with both of those pools of folks to help you get the most accurate, up-to-date information to really make sure that you are empowered as a consumer going into an ADU project, and making sure on the front end that it's a reasonable and smart way for you to invest your time and resources. So, really quick overview of the ADU process, and all of this is also available on our website at napasonomaadu.org. We really focus in the buckets of 1, getting started, and 2, connecting you with the folks that can help as your professionals move you through steps 2 to 6. So one of the ways that we help folks is we do one-on-one ADU feasibility consults. And our expert, Scott Johnson, does these really wonderful customized consults. And we can go to the next slide. We're just about to wrap up this holiday special. So if you sign up by December 31st, we are offering the consults for just $89. Napa Valley Community Foundation and our other supporters subsidize the cost of those consults, which cost more than $89. But our focus really is just trying to make sure that we can get as many resources, as much help to our community as possible in a way that is reasonable and doable for you. So if you want to do an ADU consult with Scott, sign up before December 31st for this holiday special. A little bit on what we do. We sit down, we do some pre-screening research on your parcel. Then we have an hour-long virtual meeting with you in Zoom, where we talk through your goals for building an ADU, your budget, your particular property, the rules in your jurisdiction, and answer any questions that you have. Give you a recommendation on the type of ADU and all kinds of nitty-gritty details that'll help you make sure that you're set up for success from step 0 of the process. And then we issue a customized feasibility report that has detailed next steps, a list of all the potential professionals that might be most helpful for your particular project. And then we send you off to go check out our very detailed ADU gallery, which Amity, our wonderful behind-the-scenes technological superhero, who's with us this evening, doing all the Zoom tech behind the scenes, she's dropping into the chat. Links to those ADU feasibility consults to sign up, links to our extensive online ADU gallery with over 50 different ADU plans. So check all those out. We also have a really extensive webinar library on our website where we cover all kinds of ADU questions. To that end, I want to just make sure that you all know we're really going to focus on financing your ADU this evening. And we have a ton of other webinars on our library where you can access information on prefab ADUs, how to do a permit application for an ADU, all kinds of things. And you can also do a consult with us if you want to sit down one-on-one. All right, with that, moving ahead, we also just want to make sure that you all saw the announcement in the news. It was actually covered by all kinds of different news outlets. This is so exciting. The County of Napa in the new year is launching an affordable ADU forgivable loan program. And we have had the pleasure of helping them think through the details of this program to make sure that it meets the needs of a wide range of homeowners and tenants in our community, to build and develop more ADUs that can be affordable and accessible to more folks in our community who need housing. So we are really excited about this. It is going to provide you with a lot of incredible support if you are a homeowner in Napa. And if we go to the next slide, you can see a little bit more detail, thanks Amity, on the forgivable loan program. And we're going to actually be doing more on this in the future, but I wanted to make sure, since this has been now publicly announced, that you are aware up to over $100,000 of a forgivable loan to build your ADU if you live in any city or in unincorporated Napa County. If you're in Sonoma County, feel free to reach out to your local officials and ask them if they will be interested in doing something like this for us in Sonoma County, because that would be wonderful too. All right, moving on. And Amity, thanks for dropping all those helpful resources. On that note, coming up Wednesday, January 18th at 6 p.m., we are going to be doing a deep dive webinar on the guidelines and details of this really exciting Napa County ADU forgivable loan program. You can register at the link that Amity just dropped in the chat today. We'll be joined by Napa County staff who can answer all of your detailed questions on the loan. I want to just say right now, I can't answer detailed questions about the loan this evening because that is the purview of the county, and I don't want to become a third party muddling up information. But the county is going to be joining us on January 18th to answer all of your questions. And if you want to email me, I can get you more information for the time being on that program, but really excited about that. All right. So I also want to make sure, before we dive into the presentations from our wonderful finance experts this evening, for those of you who are not aware, we have a very detailed webinar with Redwood Credit Union in our webinar library that Amity has shared in the chat about this really wonderful ADU construction loan product that Napa Valley Community Foundation partnered with Redwood Credit Union to launch. A couple reasons this is really amazing. It helps homeowners who are on a lower fixed income or who have less equity in their existing home unlock up to sometimes over $300,000 to build an ADU. And right now that rate is at 4.375%, pretty incredible with today's finance reality with interest rates. So a really incredible opportunity to check in. You can reach out to Redwood Credit Union and set up a consult with Sean Charter. His contact information is on our website, in our vendor registry, along with the finance experts that are here with us this evening. So feel free to check that out from Redwood Credit Union. Okay, I want to make sure that we dive into our content pretty rapidly here this evening. So I am going to introduce you all to our first finance expert joining us this evening. We are so thrilled to have with us today, and Charles, you can unmute and bring your video up. Charles Edington and I also want to make sure I don't even mispronounce this because I just realized I've never heard it said out loud. Tell us about RenoFi.
Yeah, absolutely. RenoFi. Yep. Short for renovation finance, makes it easy that way. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Renee. Really happy to talk to all of you today. Yeah, so RenoFi, and we can go ahead and jump to the next slide if you like. So my name's Charles Edington. I'm the National Account Executive for RenoFi. We are a renovation home equity lender. What that means is we lend based on home equity for renovation loans. We have a specific niche with ADU lending. We lend, what makes us a little bit unique is that we lend in second lien position. So there's no requirement to refinance your first mortgage with RenoFi. We allow you to borrow up to 90% of the future value of your property. And so we take the current value plus all of the equity that you'll build by building an ADU, and we lend, again, up to 90% of the combined value of that property. The benefit of second mortgages, obviously, the average interest rate out there today is somewhere in the 3s or 4% range. A lot of people took advantage of the super low rates in 2019 through 2021. And a lot of people would love to build an ADU, but do not wish to refinance out of that rate. You do not need to touch your first mortgage to work with us. We will lend either as a fixed rate second mortgage or as a home equity line of credit. Again, we have fixed rates and variable rates on those loans, and it really just depends on what the wants and needs are for the particular homeowner as to which way you go. One other nice thing about our loans specifically is that compared to standard construction loans and other renovation loans, there are no draw schedules or inspections. What that means is that once you close on your loan, the funds go into your account and you have the ability to pay your contractor as agreed. ADU builders, even though they are certainly willing to work with the draw schedule, it does limit the ability of the contractor to just kind of work according to their schedule. And so we do enable the homeowner to pay as agreed that way. We're not subject to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac restrictions. What that means generally is that we are not bound by governmental regulations. So we have the ability to lend on properties or things like prefab ADUs, manufactured ADUs, maybe some construction methods that aren't allowable by FHA or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And so we can be a little bit more flexible on the builds that we lend on. One of the other big features is that we will lend up to $500,000, technically $499,999, but especially as you get into larger ADUs and 2 units and larger construction projects like that, we do have the flexibility to go up to $500,000, especially for people that are building an ADU to rent as an investment. We allow an interest-only draw period or an interest-only payments for 10 years. And so you have the ability with a home equity line of credit to, just like a credit card, pay down as much principal as you desire, or you can make an interest-only payment. And so if your goal is cash flow on an ADU and it's investment or a rental, then you have the ability to make that interest-only payment and maximize your cash flow. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, just a quick comparison. So on our loans, again, it's a renovation loan, similar to a construction loan, in that we will allow you to borrow against the future value of the property, but you do not need to refinance your first mortgage. And it's different than a standard home equity line of credit. Again, we do lend off the future value of the property. Yeah, here we can post some contact info. We have a number of different things that you can check out on our website. We have a full system where you can go through, type in some information. We have a calculator where you can kind of move around on a widget and just play around some different scenarios to see what rates and payments might look like for you. And then if you go to renofi.com/how-it-works, there's a whole storyboard of walking you through the process and gives you the ability to really just walk through your scenario. And from there, you can also schedule a call with one of our renovation advisors who'd be happy to walk you through what your options are.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charles. And actually, if you could go back, Amity, to Charles's last slide there, and thank you, Amity, for dropping his contact information in the chat. Let's take a quick question we have from Diana for you, Charles. How is the future value of the property determined for the loan?
That's a great question. Yeah. So what we do is we start with an initial consultation. We're going to work with both the homeowner and the contractor to get a full spec and bids and really everything we might possibly need to be able to tell the story of what that ADU is going to look like, and how it adds value to the property. We put that package together and then we order an appraisal. We assess both the current value of the property and the future value of the property. And so we lend up to 90% combined loan to value, meaning your first mortgage plus your second mortgage, up to 90% of the future value of the property.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Super helpful and wonderful to have you walk us through all of your offerings there and information, Charles. I'm looking forward to hearing from you more when we start taking more Q&A, but thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's dive in. I want to introduce you to our other finance experts joining us this evening. First, I want to introduce you to Lindsay Moon. You have had the pleasure, if you've joined us for many of our other webinars, of hearing from Lindsay. And I'm going to let Lindsay introduce herself briefly, and then we're going to introduce her colleague Elizabeth, and then we'll move into their content.
Thank you, Renee. It's great to be here, and happy holidays, everybody. Elizabeth and I work for Searchlight Lending. We are independent mortgage officers, and we really pride ourselves on both in the box and out of the box loan solutions, all different kinds and all different kinds of properties, all different kinds of incomes. Not only that, I've got a great background in construction, and we're both very passionate about solving for these housing crises we have. If you want to bump to the next slide, Elizabeth can introduce herself.
Hi, Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Renee, for having us. So Lindsay went into in-depth about what Searchlight Lending, we're out of your box lender, which we'll explain a little in detail further in the presentation. So we do conventional financing, but also you're out of the box. So what does that mean? Not your A-paper loans specifically. We do a lot of loans, especially for self-employed people who don't fit the criteria that a lot of retail banks assist with. And we'll go more into detail later, but that's Searchlight Lending, and I'm Elizabeth with the loan officer there.
I'm getting a question with a lot of people that are kind of kicking the tire, so to speak, and learning about the process of the an ADU process and the financing process is why finance. And people are like, well, I've got the money to do it. I mean, not everybody does, but those that may be considering whether they do it with financing or with cash, it's still a good idea to finance. It's always a good idea to leverage and keep your cash in hand. It's safer, and rates really are not that bad. Historically, if you look at the long picture, they rise and fall, and good loan officers like ourselves, we monitor your mortgages. So when we see a benefit where the borrower can save some money, we pick up the phone and let you know, hey, it's time to refinance. A lot of people ask me too about the return on investment, and which is ROI. They are a big investment, but it's something that's going to pay off absolutely in the long term. Sometimes with short term, it's going to be dependent on where that property is. There's really a lot of positives. I tried to kind of outline positives and negatives. And when I thought about negatives, I'm like, well, you know, it's just not really for the faint of heart. It does cost a lot of money. You sometimes get a pushback from building departments and neighbors. You know, it's something to undertake, and you really have to want it. But the positives, I think, outweigh. You're increasing the value of your home regardless. You are you have a new housing, you're solving for an issue, whether, I hear stories all the time of people wanting to either by choice because they want family members living close by, or because of necessity, like their kids can't afford to live in California because it's really expensive to live here. And whether you're building an ADU for that reason or another reason, or for an income stream, it pays off in the long run. And there's all of these great companies out there that kind of help you with that pre-construction and getting you from, hey, I'm thinking about building an ADU to I'm ready to build my ADU. Here are my plans. Here's my permit. I'm ready to go. That we call pre-construction, and it's very underrated. There are some really great companies out there that will help you kind of get that underway. It's also always a good time when it makes sense for you. People also ask me that question, and well, is it a good time? Is it not? Don't worry about the rate. Again, you can always refinance down the line. What makes sense is, can I do this now, or can I not do this now? Next slide, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's kind of the saying, like, you have to spend money to make money, right?
Absolutely.
You have to put the upfront costs first, but then at the end of the day, long term, it's worth it either for a family member or the passive income. So in regards to how to go about financing these ADUs, one of the main questions Lindsay and I ask our clients is there enough existing equity in your current home? And if there is, then we do a cash out refinance. I know right now where rates are at, a lot of people took advantage of the decrease in rates in 2020 and 2021. So if you do have one of those low rates, you don't want to touch it, you want to leave it there. And then you could go either with a HELOC or HELOC loan. The major difference is a HELOC is variable and HELOC loan is fixed. And a really cool thing that Searchlight can offer you is we do offer unconventional HELOCs. So what that means is HELOCs are usually underwritten conventionally. So we look at tax returns and pay stubs to underwrite the HELOC. We do have non-conventional ones, so we can go off 12 months of bank statements to underwrite that loan instead of going off tax returns for self-employed individuals. Another way that we can also finance ADUs is, if you don't have existing equity in your current home, would be a construction loan. Now this loan is more costly because there's two closings. You have to first usually a 12 month period where the construction is completed, and then after that you have to go into permanent financing, which would be like a 30-year fixed or an ARM loan once the construction is complete. So because of that, there's two closings, it's more costly, and it takes longer, the underwriting of the loan and to finish the ADU. But there's also odd circumstances. Maybe you have an investment property that you want to include an ADU on. There's different ways, and specifically to give you an answer for your specific scenario, it'd be best to reach out to Lindsay or myself so we can individually talk the situation with you and give you more tips and tricks to go about your specific scenario. Yeah.
And just to sum up, we really do it all. We are independent mortgage brokers, so we're not middlemen, we're wholesale. We work with hundreds of different lenders, and we're really shopping for you. We're a real benefit to you, the borrower, to consumers. Everybody's scenario is different, and we recognize that, and everyone's situation is unique. So we kind of have this arsenal of products, and so we really enjoy the variability and giving people ideas about how they can use the equity in their home to make it greater. And by doing pretty much any construction project, you're increasing your asset. You're not going out and buying a fancy car or going on a fancy vacation. You are investing in your asset. And we really enjoy helping you grow that asset or creating new assets and purchasing new properties. So think of us for kind of as your one-stop shop. When we do get into a scenario where we can't, we're trying one avenue and it doesn't work, we can pivot to a different one without, you don't have to be like, oh, sorry, we can't help you, go somewhere else. No, we're like, okay, that didn't work, let's try this. And we also can give you ideas on how and where you need to be if you're not qualified yet. we can give you kind of marching orders, like this is where you're going to need to be, so you've got a path forward. We love talking to you. It's always confidential, and that's Searchlight Lending.
Awesome. Thank you both, Lindsay and Elizabeth. It's always a pleasure to have you all joining us. And I just so appreciate what you said, because, you know, I'm the director of the nonprofit Napa Sonoma ADU Center. I'm actually a legal aid attorney by background and education. And so I am not an expert on finance. That's why I have you all and Charles joining me here. And to that end, Charles, feel free to bring up your video again, and we'll get into some of these questions that we've got here. But I just want to say, you know, I was doing some research and interviews with folks about, you know, how can we make sure that accessory dwelling units are an avenue of building wealth, not just for already wealthy homeowners who can pretty readily already afford to finance an ADU, but for regular middle and working class American and immigrant homeowners who are trying to get ahead, trying to either cover their existing mortgage or trying to build their wealth strategically. And one of the things that I learned, which really resonated with me, is wealthy homeowners, who we're here to help all homeowners, but wealthy homeowners often already understand how to leverage debt to build their wealth. Like, that's something that they're pretty well versed in. And where we see folks really struggling is middle or working class homeowners who may not have all of that kind of, and that's who I'm, you know, talking about, like myself. We don't know how to leverage debt to build our wealth. Like, that sounds really scary. Like, what are all these numbers? You know, it's overwhelming. And for many of us, this is the largest investment after our home that we'll ever make. So it's very daunting. So I love how you talk about, you know, let's connect one-on-one. Let's really think through strategically whether this makes sense for you. And the Napa Sonoma ADU Center really wants to make sure that you make a smart financial choice for you. We're here to serve our community, and we don't want homeowners to, you know, get into a bad position financially. So that's why we do our best to get you this education and information so that you are empowered from step zero to make the right decision about building an ADU. And to that end, Scott, if you want to bring your video up, that's why we do those one-on-one individualized feasibility consults as well, to say, hey, this is what makes sense for your property. You know, you could say, oh, this makes more sense financially, but actually with your local rules, you can't do that. Or with your local rules, you could actually do this other thing. And if your goal is to build an ADU for passive income as a rental, you might consider XYZ things that you wouldn't otherwise consider. So we're the team to try to help you all think this through. And I'm seeing some excellent questions coming through. Before we turn to the questions, actually, there is a question on this. I wanted to make sure to touch base. I know a lot of you are wondering, what is the deal with the state of California's CalHFA $40,000 pre-development grant? For those of you who have not heard of this, I'm going to just share my screen super briefly with everyone. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've done entire webinars just on this topic. But for those of you who are not aware, this is the CalHFA website. And the state of California had a pot of $100 million to issue to individualized homeowners to help cover the soft costs, pre-development costs of your ADU. And here is the latest update. And this is how I'm getting my information, you guys, is from the CalHFA website. I regret to inform you, I don't have more insider knowledge. I hear inside things, but they're often conflicting. And so I actually just want to refer you guys to this website for now. Right now, CalHFA is saying that all of the grants are fully reserved as of December 9th. However, for those of you who know, you can apply through these lenders or through these special financing grant program participants. The two that are able to finance the grants in Napa and Sonoma are CECITA and HPP Cares. And that's why some of you are asking questions about specifically about CECITA and HPP Cares. If you go to the most recent one that was operating here in Napa and Sonoma counties with an open grant portal as of like a week ago. That is CCETA, and you can see on their website, they're temporarily pausing grant reservations. They, however, are encouraging folks to still apply to get added to, it seems like, a wait list perhaps, so that if the state does end up refunding the program, and we understand that the state has $50 million that they do want to allocate to some form of support for accessory dwelling units in California, and it's possible that that would go towards funding more of these $40,000 grants or to other things. We don't know for sure. So what I am hearing, and I will welcome Lindsay, Elizabeth, and Charles to pipe in if they have other thoughts. What I am hearing right now is the grants, if you've already applied, it may be getting processed. So sit tight and be patient to wait and hear from HPB Cares or CCETA or whoever you applied for it through. If not, it seems like it doesn't hurt for you to apply, and fingers crossed that there will be more funds in the future. Charles or Lindsay or Elizabeth, anything you would add to that you have knowledge of that I don't?
Just that I'm hopeful that they're really, I think they do need to do a year-end reconciliation to make sure that this grant was helpful and will continue to be helpful. And if it's showing so, I think there will be more funds released, or they'll maybe revamp the program, depending on how it.
Yeah, Charles?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, especially since CCETA came on the scene after HPB Cares, the ability of these organizations with extremely small personnel to respond to all the inquiries has been obviously pretty limited. And so you've got a lot of people out there who have applied with both, maybe even have a preliminary approval with both CCETA and HPB Cares. You have people that have approval for the grant that ultimately might not use the grant 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now. So yeah, anyone out there listening who's thinking like, maybe I apply, maybe I don't, just go ahead and apply. It can't hurt you. I would highly encourage you to go ahead and at least get in the queue, so that if and when those funds are available, especially if there are 50 million more coming, then 40K of that comes your way.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you both so much for that. And for those of you asking, Redwood Credit Union applied to become a preferred lender, and their application is being processed as of the last I heard. Of course, the funds currently maybe have run out, so we shall see what happens there. But if you're asking, RCU applied a bit ago, and we're waiting to see on that. So to be continued. All right, with that, we got a couple questions we need to start with that we got emailed before the webinar. So here is the first one, and it is about second mortgage. So if we get a loan from a financial institution, it will be considered a second mortgage. Is that correct? Since we already have a mortgage on our main house, is there any way around this? We'd like to avoid taking out a second mortgage if possible. So I'd love to hand this to one of you to talk about, number one, pros and cons of a second mortgage. Is that such a bad thing? Number two, whether there are options beyond that don't require a second mortgage. So one of you can just raise your hand and chime in.
Because we do second mortgages, I'll take that one. So there are a number of options available, both with RenoFi and other people. You can avoid a second mortgage by refinancing your first mortgage if you so desire. But really, the only thing with a second mortgage, what it is, it's essentially a second lien tied to your property. And so the benefit of a second mortgage is that you don't have to refinance your first mortgage. The con is that you're right, that lien will be attached to your property. There are some unsecured loans out there. For example, we lend up to about $100,000 unsecured, meaning that it is not attached as a lien to your property. But interest rates are significantly lower for mortgage loans because they are secured to a property, right? So there's collateral there, and that gives a lender assurance that obviously you intend to make those payments because it is tied to your home. But on the second mortgage side, there are fixed rate options, and so if the variable payments that they're often attached to home equity lines of credit are of concern, there are fixed rate options that's typically going to come with a higher payment. The home equity line of credit typically is going to come with, at least ours come with a 10-year interest only period where you can make just interest only payments. And so typically the payment on that's going to be about as low as you could possibly get. Yeah, so several different options, and there's not just one way to go. You know, you can go first mortgage, second mortgage, virtually infinite amounts or different types of either, or you could go with an unsecured loan. However, those are typically limited, a little bit lower loan amount, and the interest rates are almost always going to be higher.
Yeah, unsecured is definitely a riskier option. So it's certainly, yeah, the second mortgage you don't really have much of a choice, but regardless, it's you have the choice of doing kind of a HELOC or HE loan, it's kind of depending on your comfort level as well. The HELOC adjustable, the HE loan is a fixed rate, which will, like Charles said, be a little bit higher. But there's certainly different options out there.
Thank you, Lindsay. We have a couple really great questions from Caitlin. The first one is and I'm wondering, Elizabeth, if you could answer this one. When you say leverage your debt, does that tend to increase your monthly payment? So Elizabeth, if you could actually take it a step further and help explain, what do I mean when I say leverage your debt? And does that tend to increase your monthly payment?
Yeah. So basically, yeah, I'm all for leveraging debt. And basically what that means is when you're purchasing a home, yes, you're taking on debt, but there's equity within the home that you can use. And that's what it means basically to leverage the debt. So use the equity in the home to either, you can do whatever you like with the equity, but for this purpose is to build the ADU or construct the ADU. So you want to either cash out, refinance, or HELOC, use that equity, that debt that you already have, to go and create the ADU. So yes, do leverage the debt that you have. The equity.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. And by the way, your internet, I feel like, might not be super strong. We're getting a little bit of slowdown when you speak, but not terribly. Just FYI, in case there's anything you can troubleshoot that on now. Let me turn to another question from Caitlin, which I will answer, which is, are there more financial options if we rent the ADU for a lower amount to provide affordable housing for our community? So Caitlin, we did cover this a bit at the beginning of the webinar, but it's a good kind of overarching question to circle back to. The answer is, it depends on where you are located. For the first time in our region, starting in the new year, the answer is yes, if you live in any city or in unincorporated county in Napa County. We don't currently have an option in Sonoma County. But amazing news, starting in the new year, Napa County is launching an incredible $6 million investment in ADU development, which includes a forgivable ADU loan program, whereby if you rent the ADU at a lower rate for 5 years, your entire loan will be forgiven. And they're financing up to $105,000 on the ADU, depending on the project and the homeowner's eligibility. And we are going to be holding a very deep dive webinar going into the details of that program on January 18th, if you would like to join us for that webinar. And I'm sending it to you in writing here in the Q&A. And Amity, if you don't mind dropping the link to that webinar once again in the chat, that would be excellent. Okay. Let's turn to the next question that was actually sent in advance of the webinar. I am looking, so this is a question about whether or not it's easier to fund a junior ADU, to get financing for a junior ADU or an ADU. So I'm looking to buy a house in Sonoma County in the next year, and I'm keeping an eye on the potential for a junior ADU, or looking for a small house with a larger yard to build a prefab detached ADU, or possibly convert a garage or existing structure on the site into an ADU. So my question is in regard to the ease of financing either one, the junior ADU or an ADU. Is this something that you can provide me information on? So one question, for example, that one kind of added thing was like, if I was to go to Redwood Credit Union and talk to them about, financing a junior ADU, how much future value would be taken into account, right? So that's, and I know you guys can't answer for RCU, but generally, as finance experts, if you can weigh in on your thinking on that. It's a really good question. Charles, do you want to start off? And then maybe we can hand it to Lindsay.
Yeah, as far as whether or not it's easier to get financing on a junior versus a standard ADU. So not as far as we're concerned, not really. You know, we're pretty flexible on the type of ADU, whether it's a garage conversion, attached. Really, we're looking at the value that's provided by that ADU. And so the more valuable ADU that you're adding, the easier the financing. And then depending on the county and depending on requirements, and someone's probably better than me to answer this question, but I know that in a lot of cases, you can have a junior ADU and an ADU, and we'll only finance one ADU on the property, but sometimes you can kind of pick and choose the way you want to strategically go about that, and maybe do it as a two-phased approach. But as far as we're concerned, it's no more difficult either way.
That's helpful, Charles. I mean, one thing I'll note before handing it over to Lindsay is a junior ADU usually is valued significantly less than a ADU. And so the question asker is correct in general about the fact that if they're relying on future value of the unit to leverage capital, they will not be able to access as much for a junior ADU versus a regular ADU. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Scott, you're raising your hand, but let's let Lindsay chime in and then let's hear your thoughts.
Oh, I can hear Scott's thoughts. I think,
Probably.
I was going to say, like, it really, like, if you are tying into existing conditions, that can be just as costly as building from the ground up, because ground up is just like simple. It's a lot more straightforward. If you're doing like a garage conversion or converting an area of your house, once you like open up walls, there can be a lot more unknowns. Regardless, though, in terms of financing, I just want to say it does really come down to what you're qualified for, you know, and can, you know, that's really the first step is what can we qualify you for, and does that jive with your budget as well? You know, we definitely have a lot of experience with construction, so we can speak to that and help you understand making sure that those two things are going to work. The last place you want to be is in the middle of construction and you run out of money, because that's not fun financing. We do it, but it's not fun.
Scott, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, it for ADU, junior ADU, it really depends on the details of your exact project. Lindsay said it probably best of all. In general, junior ADUs are considered to be valued a little bit less. They can often cost less compared to a larger detached ADU, but those kind of generalities break down when you're actually talking about your house, your project, your property. The details of what you're trying to do and what your ultimate goals are really need to be taken into account. And talking to a professional like Lindsay and Elizabeth and Charles, that's really where you want to try and figure out what is the best solution for your particular needs. It's property dependent, it's personal finance dependent, but from a 10,000-foot perspective, junior versus regular, they're fairly interchangeable beyond the permitting side, beyond the planning department side.
I think there's also too a big difference. Something just to think about on your own personal side is just whether or not you want someone to be living on an adjacent wall to you, or prefer to have some separate space. There's that issue as well. If you're, shopping for a property and looking for a new home, that's something to think about.
And for the person
that's
who was
super
shopping for Sonoma County, I would say that the general rule is try not to get something with a septic system. Get something on city sewer.
Yeah, that's not fun.
We actually, on that note, have written a very detailed blog post on our website of what to look for if you're looking to purchase new property that you want to build an ADU on. So we'll drop that in the chat in a minute. Okay, Cole Peterson has a question for Lindsay and Elizabeth. Okay, Cole, you're asking the hard question, so we're gonna have to give Charles a chance to chime in
I'm
on this
honored.
one too. If someone's seeking a second position construction loan based on the ARV, what options would Searchlight recommend? It seems like both Redwood Credit Union and RenoFi offer good options. Is that what Searchlight would recommend? And when would Searchlight recommend Redwood Credit Union for a certain project versus RenoFi for another type of project, since both projects sound similar? And again, Charles, of course, you're going to be chiming in on your thoughts on this too, but the question's directed at Lindsay and Elizabeth to start. Elizabeth, do you want to share your thoughts, and then we'll turn to Lindsay? This is Cole Peterson's question.
Can you hear me? My internet unfortunately is going in and out, but can you hear me?
For the moment, yes. I'll let you know if not.
Okay, perfect. If not, Lindsay, just take over. Yeah, so sorry, can you repeat he said what for Searchlight lending recommend prior than compared to Redwood Credit Union?
Well, so the first part of the question, and it's written here in the Q&A under Cole Peterson, by the way, if that helps. I know I process better by reading. So if someone's seeking a second position construction loan based on the ARV, what options would Searchlight recommend? And then it seems like RCU and RenoFi offer good options. Is that what Searchlight would recommend? And for what type of project would RCU make sense versus RenoFi?
Lindsay,
correct. Sounds similar.
Got it. Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but construction loans, they have to be in first position.
The only ones that I know of actually are RenoFi and Redwood Credit Union. And unless there are more, then absolutely. And honestly, if we can't help, which is rare, I am absolutely I love referring. But the only ones that we have in terms of as completed, looking at the as completed value for a construction loan is right now, we only have one that's for first place.
Redwood Credit Union is second position product.
Right. So yeah. I would absolutely refer either Redwood or RenoFi to that borrower if that's what they need to do. Mm-hmm.
Super helpful. Charles, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage I would encourage any homeowner to, especially, you know, hearing it here from the industry professionals, you have two options, so you might as well speak with both and determine what's best for you. Redwood's a great credit union. Can't go wrong there. A couple differentiators that I'm certain of. I believe they cap out at 300,000, which is a substantial amount of money, but doesn't necessarily get every single ADU done. We will go up to $500,000, so that stretches a little bit. I know that because we have customers that come to us and who are comparing us to Redwood. The 1 year draw period can be a little bit of a limiting factor with that, just because, you know, sometimes you don't know exactly what the timing of the construction is going to be, especially on a stick built. And so I know that 1 year draw period can really tighten the screws on a construction project and add some stress there. But I would encourage any homeowner to shop, look at your first mortgage options, look at your second mortgage options. And, you know, for someone who has a ton of equity and doesn't need to go off of after renovation value, you know, there may be just other line of credit options out there that might make sense. I mean, again, I know RenoFi to be a terrific option, but you know, not every time for every customer.
That's such a great response, Charles. And I will say, I have heard through the grapevine that RCU will sometimes go beyond 300,000, but I don't know the details, and $500,000 is excellent. So that's really, really helpful synopsis. Thank you very much, Charles. I want to turn to Alexandre's question, the first one. With construction costs per square foot going for higher than buying an existing home, how will the value of the home benefit in short to midterm of adding square footage? In some areas, values only reach a certain cap. At what point is the added cost of an ADU too high? Lindsay, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah,
it's Alexandre's first question in the Q&A. Are you seeing it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to absorb it all. I mean, that's really hard to kind of answer. It really does depend on where you are, and it is a long-term investment. It depends on what and where you're building. Yeah, it's a little bit subjective, so that I hate to say it, it's a hard question to answer. Regardless, though, I think, I think if I remember correctly, we actually did a webinar maybe this time last year, and we were
Yes.
talking about how some kind of, even on the ADU calculator, like if you have this property, and you spend this much, like when will you see that return? So maybe if they play around with the calculator that is on the website, that could help.
That's just what I was thinking, actually. So for folks who haven't seen our other webinars or aren't aware, we have this ADU calculator tool. I'm sharing my screen here, and Amity can drop into the chat the link to this ADU calculator. So basically you can pull up your jurisdiction here in the Napa Sonoma region, the type of construction, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and the square footage. And then there's other inputs you can put in here, like the quality of construction, the site condition, stuff like that, and info about your financing and rents. And then here on the right, it will give you outputs. So it'll show you your projected rough estimate of costs. So projected rent, monthly expenses, including insurance, if you're going to rent it out, the project management, a vacancy allowance, all of that. And then a rough estimate of your soft and hard costs on building that ADU. And then here you can look at and see the time, years to earn back your cash investment. So here you can input how much of a cash investment you're going to make, for example. And when you'll see a return on investment and the estimated increase in your home value. And then you can also see projections going forward, a decade, 2 decades, and 3 decades down the line. So feel free to click into that calculator tool and check it out. It can be a useful, very rough estimate at the front end to start thinking through. And you could even pull up that tool with, one of the folks here on this Zoom in a one-on-one consult and play around with the interest rate based on the products that you're talking about to get a sense in real time. Scott, any thoughts? I can see the wheels turning.
You know me so well. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Price per square foot for construction is expensive, but at the same time, the average house price in Sonoma County is over $860,000. So if you're going to spend money to get passive income to provide housing for a family, and you're building a 500 square foot or even 1,000 square foot ADU in your yard, you're able to buy into that flexibility and that potential passive income without spending $800,000, which many people don't have that much ability to spend. They might be able to leverage and get $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, but not enough to actually buy a second property in Sonoma or Napa counties. So while the cost per square foot is often used as an apples to apples comparison, when you actually look at the what can you build in terms of wealth, what can you build of passive income, the cost per square foot metric it doesn't tell the whole story. It is expensive to build here, but it's also, there isn't really that many less expensive options to get into rental and providing housing for friends or family or a community than with an ADU. So that, and of course, and Lindsay is exactly right. The rest of it is really subjective. What's the right equation for you and money that you spend in return that you're going to get over what time, what options you have with your property. That's all a very individualized thing, and so it depends. But I did want to point out that it's very hard to get into buying a rental property outright without spending far more money than you spend on an ADU.
Thanks for that, Scott. So as we wind down, I'm going to ask a final question, and I see Charles is answering and writing the questions directed to him. Thanks so much for that, Charles. Lindsay, you and I were speaking the other day, and I'd love to hear thoughts from Lindsay, Elizabeth, Charles, and Scott on this question in our remaining 5 minutes. And I came to you, Lindsay, and I said, oh my gosh, construction costs are increasing. Inflation is rising, interest rates are going up. Like, I'm feeling a little down about this and feeling a bit anxious. Like, we need more housing in our community. Accessory dwelling units are a really wonderful piece of the puzzle to working towards resolving our housing crisis. I talk to homeowners every single day who are desperate to build an ADU because they need to house a family member, or they want to double down on the investment in the property. You know, so many reasons, good reasons to need to build a second unit on your property. But is this something that's even feasible for the regular person, you know, who's already somehow managed to buy property in this area? Or how can this be possible these days? Can you tell me, Lindsay, like, real talk, like, tell people what you said to me?
Well, I mean, it is possible. I mean, I'm doing it all the time. I've got a lot of people that have successfully done the financing. They're, you know, regular old people like me. No, I'm just, I mean, all walks of life. It really, I don't know. I mean, we really strive to find the right financing solution. And if we can't, we at least try to give you like the marching orders to be like, okay, well, you're not ready quite yet, but at least we can get you there. Yeah, it's happening. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. People are doing this for whatever reason. I'm talking to people every day, every week. It's fantastic. I'm very excited. I recently also took my own webinar, just a learning webinar on community land trusts. And I think that potentially combined with ADUs also might be a really good way to help people get into homes. And we're looking into trying to find some more financing options for those as well, where it's a land lease and it's, you know, less expensive. It's like as Scott said, it's not an $860,000 home. It's a lot less because, well, I'm not going to go into that, but there's a lot of options out there, and I'm excited at where this is going.
Thank you, Lindsay. Elizabeth, your words of wisdom.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is doable. It really depends on your specific scenario, but I think the first part is purchasing the home, and that's already done. So leverage that equity that you have in that home to get you where you want to be. Obviously, if you don't qualify for a luxurious ADU, then maybe we can scale back. But obviously, this is why we're here to help you figure that out. But definitely leverage the equity you have in your home, and it will be doable.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I should also give a shout out. Elizabeth has done a full only Spanish language webinar with me in the past and speaks Spanish. And so if you know any Spanish speaking homeowners, please feel free to send them her way, by the way, if you are listening. And reference that webinar is in our webinar library that you can share with folks if they are Spanish speakers and want finance 101 tips from our expert, Elizabeth. Charles, your final words of wisdom as we part ways here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think part of the idea, and I just read the piece on the missing middle last week that really out of the Turner Center that really touched on a lot of what you're talking about. Something I think I might have failed to mention, and I think this is something that's probably available for a lot of our programs, both at RenoFi and Searchlight. You can use future ADU rental income to qualify in a lot of cases. And so you can use 75% of the gross rent on an ADU to qualify. And so if your goal is to rent it out and it's all about cash flow and gaining equity, you know, if you can, I mean, I calculated quick interest only payment on a, say, $250,000 to $300,000 loan, you know, your payment could be $1,700, $1,800, $1,900, and you could rent the unit out for $2,500, $3,000. I mean, if your credit's in decent shape and you've got the equity, or at least are going to have the equity, you know, and your goal is to rent it out, you know, it might be kind of a no-brainer from a qualification standpoint. So I think a lot more people have the ability to do this than maybe you realize.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Charles. And Amity is sharing a link to that Turner Center report that you just referenced. It's really helpful for folks if they're interested. Amity, can you pull up our closing slides and we will wrap up our evening here. But as we do that, Scott, any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard economy to think about, but I remember, being in my early 20s in the 90s and people saying, "Oh, I'm going to wait a few more years till the housing market cools off to buy. Wait a few more years." And we're talking about when homes in Petaluma were $170,000. Waiting and waiting for the price to correct. We've had sort of one major correction in all that time. That doesn't get you into a house. It doesn't get you into a rental unit that can help provide income and help build wealth. Talk to the professionals, do your research, talk to us, answer your questions, use the calculator, and figure out if it does make sense for you. I think Charles is exactly right. It makes sense for a lot more people than maybe they realize, and it's not an impossibility. It's not out of reach for a lot of people, and there are more tools and resources coming online all the time. CalHFA, Napa County, us. Go out there, have those conversations, and keep researching and figure out, can you make this work? Can you make this make sense? Because I think for most people, if they can swing this, it's a great thing. We hear from homeowners who have built, and the response and the happiness that they have been able to generate with their ADUs, whether for family or for renters, is immense. It's a big commitment, but the payoff is also big.
Thank you so much for those closing words, Scott. So a reminder to all of you, napasonoma.adu.org. You can access our vendor registry, which is where you can get contact info if you didn't already grab it from the chat for Charles, Lindsay, and Elizabeth. And we can offer you up until December 31st a discounted rate for the holidays on our individualized ADU consults with Scott. So please feel free to sign up. If you are curious about the affordable ADU forgivable loan program from Napa County launching in the new year, join us for our webinar. You can register today. January 18th, we'll be joined by staff from Napa County to dive deep into the guidelines and eligibility requirements for that incredible forgivable loan program for up to $105,000 for your ADU. If you're in Sonoma County and hearing about this and wondering, why don't we have this in Sonoma County? We need to build affordable ADUs for our community. Please email, call your elected officials in Sonoma County or in your local city and let them know, did you see this $6 million investment in ADU development that Napa County is making? Can we do something like that here? We are going to say good night. We are going to close out, and when we do, there's going to be a pop-up with a survey for you to complete. If you could please complete that survey, give us a little bit of feedback. We're always working to improve our webinars and our outreach and education for our community. Thank you so much to our supporters, and most of all, thank you so much to you for taking an hour out of your evening on a Monday night to join all of us. It was wonderful to get to chat with Charles, Elizabeth, Scott, and Lindsay this evening. Thank you all so much for your expertise. We've learned so much from you, and I hope folks are going to reach out and set up a one-on-one chat with all of our wonderful finance experts here. They can help you do a deep dive and really think through your individual needs. So looking forward to hearing from you. We're here to help. Have a great evening, everyone, and thank you so much. Good night.